With the entire South poised to fall to the British, Congress asked Washington to appoint a commander for the Southern Army. Washington turned for help to the man who had been the most reliable and important officer in all his campaigns. That was Rhode Island General Nathaniel Greene, a former Quaker.
He was an unusual general. He had a bum leg, walked with a limp. But what a bright guy he was. He had really completely absorbed Washington's strategy of an army that looked the enemy in the face.
And none in Greene's Southern Army could look the enemy in the face with more courage than the Virginia frontiersman known as the Old Wagoner, newly appointed Brigadier General Daniel Morgan.
People described him as very muscular. They described him as a giant of a man, very physical.
In his youth, Morgan had survived 500 lashes from the British during the French and Indian War in 1755. He and his Virginia riflemen had been with Benedict Arnold on the epic march to Quebec in 1775. He had been among the last to surrender when the Americans tried to take that walled city. And he and his riflemen had been decisively effective against Burgoyne at the battles known as Saratoga in 1777. Now, suffering from a bad back and arthritis, he was ready for the battle of his life.
It's only a little battle in many ways. There was really no more than about 3,000 men total, on both sides. But what an impact this had on the war.
In early January of 1781, Morgan received a message in the field from Nathaniel Greene.
Colonel Tarleton is said to be on his way to pay you a visit. I doubt not, but he will have a decent reception and a proper dismission. General Nathaniel Greene.
This is the spot where Morgan decided to fight. An open area known as the cow pens, because cows had been corralled here before driving them to market. With the broad river to Morgan's back, Tarleton had but one avenue of attack, and the Old Wagoner had no chance of retreat.
Morgan, in a number of conversations and letters to friends, had expressed a desire to have a crack at Tarleton, to get at Tarleton. He saw Tarleton as his counterpart in the British Southern Army and recognized the value of trying to destroy the Tory Legion.
The butcher Tarleton was pleased when he learned of his enemy's position.
It is certainly as good a place for action, more suitable to the nature of the troops under his command. Bannister Tarleton.
The night before the battle, Morgan used his canny frontiersman's understanding of psychology to prepare his troops.
He went among the volunteers, helped them fix their swords, joked with them about their sweethearts, told them to be in good spirits and the day would be ours. And long after I laid down, he was going among the soldiers, encouraging them and telling them that the Old Wagoner would crack his whip over Ban in the morning, as sure as they lived.
Just hold your heads, boys. 3 fires,
he would say.
And you are free. And then when you return to your homes, how the old folks will bless you and the girls kiss you for your gallant conduct.
I don't believe he slept a wink that night. Thomas Young, a volunteer at Cowpens.
An hour before daybreak, Morgan's pickets brought word that Tarleton's Legion and other crack British troops were less than 5 miles away and marching fast down this road.
Boys, get up. Vanna is coming. Daniel Morgan.
Morgan put his Green militiamen in front. They fired. Then, according to a prearranged plan, they dropped back. Tarleton viewed the action as a retreat.
Tarleton's men surged forward. They broke ranks in their enthusiasm, in their anticipation. And at that point, then, Morgan's main line loosed a really lethal blast that just decimated many of the forward units.
When the regulars fired, it seemed like one sheet of flame from right to left. Oh, it was beautiful. Thomas Young.
Sweeping in from the right was George Washington's cousin, William Washington, and his cavalry.
This man deserves to be remembered. He too was a bull, even more than Morgan. He had a neck like a pro football player, and he was a great cavalryman.
In a few moments, Colonel Washington's cavalry was among them like a whirlwind, and the poor fellows began to keel from their horses without being able to remount. The shock was so sudden and violent, they could not stand it, and immediately betook themselves to flight. James Collins, militiaman.
Morgan's militia and Continental regulars had been attacked and now began to regroup. The old wagoner rallied them. Militiaman James Collins remembered it this way.
Morgan rode up in front and, waving his sword, cried out,
Form, form, my brave fellas. Give them one more fire, the day is ours. Old Morgan was never beaten.
And Morgan said, charge! And they lowered their bayonets, and they charged from that side, and William Washington and his 120 cavalrymen hit the British from the other side, and the whole British army evaporated. Half of them threw down their guns and begged for mercy. The other half just started legging it down the road, and this battle turned the whole revolution around in the state of South Carolina, and it destroyed the cream of Tarleton's legion, which meant that the British Army no longer could make these lightning strikes.
In less than an hour of fighting, 110 of Tarleton's legion and supporting British forces were killed. 200 were wounded, and 500 became prisoners. Morgan lost only 12 men.
Cornwallis lost what he called the eyes and ears of his army, Tarleton's legion. He then surged forward in a vain effort to destroy Morgan's unit that was obviously much smaller than his main army.
But Morgan and his men, now joined by Commanding General Greene, had disappeared into the North Carolina countryside.
Cornwallis was one of the ablest of the British commanders. He was vigorous, aggressive, sanguine, but ultimately, I'm afraid, there was a misjudgment. He was lured into pursuing Greene across North Carolina, back from river to river, and of course losing men on the way.
Morgan claimed back problems and malarial fevers and chose to return to his home in Virginia. Greene's task was now to win back the South while keeping his weakened and vulnerable army intact. His basic strategy was not to win battles, it was not to lose them.
We fight, get beat, rise, and fight again. General Nathaniel Greene.
Although Morgan had quit the theater of battle, he left Greene chillingly efficient advice.
You have a great number of militia. If they fight, you beat Cornwallis. If not, he will beat you and perhaps cut your regulars to pieces. Put the militia in the center with some picked troops in their rear to shoot down the first man that runs. Daniel Morgan.
When Greene's army met Cornwallis at this site at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, his line of militia did flee. But his regulars held, and soon Cornwallis had to turn to a brutally cold logic of his own to save his army. He gave the order to fire upon friend and foe alike with cannon.
This is an 18th century grape shot, which would have been discharged from a cannon. You discharged a barrel full of those at the enemy, rather like an enormous blunderbuss. At the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, an attack mingled British and American troops. The moment was extremely critical.